the night my brother raised his glass and said, "And of course, our Nora, still saving the world one classroom at a time." I was sitting at the folding table they'd set up near the coat closet. Not a real table, a folding one, the kind you rent for overflow. It had a paper tablecloth held down with 2 small pumpkins from the dollar section at Superstore and my name written on a sticky note because they'd apparently run out of the place cards they'd ordered from Etsy. Everyone else at the main tables had cream cardstock with a calligraphy font. I still have the sticky note somewhere. I don't know why I kept it. The Whitmore family has been in real estate development in the Greater Toronto area since my grandfather came over from Edinburgh in the early 70s with $200 and the contact name that turned out to be useless. He figured it out anyway. He always did. My father built on what he'd started. Whitmore Property Group, commercial and residential, projects from Mississauga to Barrie. A glass-walled office on King Street West with their names on the directory. My brother Adrian followed him in at 22, straight from Rotman. His photo is on the company website now, standing in front of a condo development in Etobicoke with the same angle my father uses in his own headshot. I am not on the website. Not because I failed to do something worth noting, because when I was 19 and said I wanted to study education instead of business, the room went quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when someone has disappointed everyone simultaneously but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. My mother's response was measured. She set down her fork. We were at Swiss Chalet, the one on Yonge, my father's choice for important conversations, and she said, "Teaching. That's a very secure choice." The pause before secure carried everything she didn't say. My father nodded slowly in the way he nods when he's deciding not to engage. And from that point on, my career became, in family shorthand, Nora's path. Spoken warmly, always. The warmth was the problem. It had the texture of a consolation. 7 years is a long time to be someone's consolation. I teach grade 4 at a public school in Scarborough. I make just under $60,000 a year with the grid increase, which in Toronto means I have a 1-bedroom apartment in a building where the elevator works 2 days out of 3, and I pack lunch every day, and I don't think about it too hard. I love my job in the way that's difficult to explain to people who measure work by what it produces. I watch children figure things out, not just math facts or reading levels. I watch them figure out how to handle being wrong in front of other people, how to ask for help, how to try something they're certain they'll fail. Last year, I had a student who couldn't read a single full sentence in September. By March, he was reading to the class. His mother cried at the spring showcase. I cried in my car on the way home. My family calls it working with kids in a tone that suggests they think it's temporary. 7 years in, still temporary. The moment I stopped expecting that to change came about 8 months ago. Our school division recognized our literacy intervention program, something I'd helped build from scratch with 2 other teachers and our resource coordinator. Something we piloted on a shoestring and expanded through a grant I'd written over 3 weekends in February. As a finalist for a provincial education award. The ceremony was in Ottawa. I sent the details to the family group chat 4 weeks in advance. My father replied the next morning, "So proud of you." That weekend I've got the Brampton site walkthrough, you know how that goes. Send pictures. That same weekend, he and Adrian were photographed at the groundbreaking for a mixed-use development in Vaughan. Adrian posted it on LinkedIn with the caption, "Legacy in Progress." My father commented a red heart. I saw it while I was in the lobby of the Shaw Centre in Ottawa, in a blazer I'd bought specifically for the event, waiting for the program to begin. I left my award citation on the kitchen counter when I got home. After 2 weeks, I stopped seeing it. It just became part of the counter. So when people ask why I never talked about Theo much, why I kept him separate from my family's orbit, the simplest answer is, they never asked. My mother knew I was seeing someone. Her complete investigation, conducted by text in October, was, Is he in education too? No. What does he do? He runs his family's farm. A pause. You can feel pauses in texts, in the delay before the next bubble. And then, that's lovely. Very grounding. That was it. 8 months of my life, summarized and filed away in one word. Grounding. Theodore Marsh, Theo to everyone, runs just under 900 acres of mixed farm in Norfolk County, about 2.5 hours southwest of the city. 3rd generation. His grandfather broke the land. His father expanded into greenhouse production. Theo took it further. Heritage grain varieties, direct partnerships with restaurants and specialty grocers in Toronto and Hamilton, a community-supported agriculture program that serves 400 households. He wakes before 5. He knows his fields the way some people know their own handwriting. He can look at a row of wheat in July and tell you what the yield will be in September. He drives a 12-year-old F-150 with a cracked side mirror he's fixed 3 times with the same tube of epoxy. The first time I went to the farm, I saw a stack of binders on the kitchen table, detailed, tabbed, annotated in pencil, and assumed they were crop records. They were, but underneath them was something else, a legal brief, dense and margin-filled. A letter on Regional Planning Authority letterhead. A printed email thread with a subject line I caught only part of. Agricultural Land Trust. Board vote before December. I asked him about it once casually. He said, old zoning thing, not interesting. I let it go. Not because I wasn't curious, because it didn't change anything that mattered. He'd asked me, on our second date, what I thought made a child feel safe enough to take a risk in a classroom. Not what grade do you teach, or do you get summers off? What made a child feel safe enough to risk being wrong? I talked for 20 minutes. He listened like he'd been waiting for exactly that conversation. Adrian's engagement party was held at a private event space in Distillery District, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a caterer out of Liberty Village that charges by the course. My parents had booked it 4 months out. 60 guests, a charcuterie installation, a custom cocktail named after my brother and his fiancée. Her name is Camille. She works in finance. She has the kind of effortless presence that makes rooms tilt toward her. I like her. This is important because nothing that happened that evening was her fault. Theo and I arrived on time. He wore a dark navy jacket over a plain white shirt. I wore a simple green dress I'd had for 2 years, not the dusty rose thing my mother had couriered to my apartment, with a note suggesting it photographed better. My parents met us near the entrance. My mother smiled at something complicated when she saw the green dress. My father shook Theo's hand with the particular firmness men use when they've already made a judgment and want to seem open-minded. I had found out about the seating 3 weeks before. I wasn't snooping. I was at my parents' house dropping off a birthday card for my aunt, and my mother's laptop was open on the kitchen island to a shared spreadsheet, the kind with color-coded tabs. I could see the table assignments from 6 feet away. Nora Plas guest, table 9. Every other immediate family member was at tables 1 through 3. Table 9 was near the service entrance. I stood there and looked at it for a moment, and then I went and left the card and drove home. I told Theo that night. We were in his kitchen and he was making tea, and I just said it flatly. I'd seen the table chart. He set down the kettle. Do you want to go? I thought about it. I sat with the question properly instead of answering around it. Then I said, yes, I want to go. Not to prove anything to them. I just want to see it clearly once with my eyes open, and then I'm done arranging myself to fit the version of me they've decided exists. He was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, I'll be there. Table 9 was exactly as indicated. Round, near the door that the servers used to move between the kitchen and the main room. The centerpiece was a small vase of grocery store carnations, I say that without judgment, I buy carnations too. They last forever. But the contrast was visible. Tables 1 through 4 had arrangements from a florist, small cards with names and calligraphy, a chocolate truffle at each place setting. We had a printed card in Arial font and a tea light in a glass holder. My parents' business partner, a man named Gerald Fitch, commercial real estate, Yorkville office, the kind of man who takes calls at dinner and considers it a flex, was seated at table 1. He glanced across the room twice in the first 15 minutes. Both times his eyes moved past our table without stopping. The third time he stopped. I watched it happen. First a narrowing, the kind that means recognition is loading, then a stillness. Then he leaned toward the woman beside him and said something, and she looked over too. My father gave his toast. He is good at this. He commands a room the way people do when they've spent decades in boardrooms. Not loudly, but with the specific gravity of someone who expects to be listened to and has never been wrong about that expectation. He spoke about Adrian with genuine pride. He talked about legacy, about what it meant to build something that outlasts you, about Camille with warmth and specificity. He'd been paying attention for 30 years and it showed. Then his gaze moved to me. My daughter Nora, he said, and his voice shifted into a register I knew well, affectionate, indulgent, with just enough distance underneath to serve as insulation. She's always done her own thing. Teaching, which, well, it takes a special kind of person, very dedicated. A pause. And she's brought her partner, who farms down in Norfolk. A real back-to-the-land story. A few people smiled. Someone laughed softly. My father looked at me directly. Still loving the simple life. He was smiling. It was a perfect smile. 60 people turned to look at me. I did not answer. I took a sip of water. I set the glass down. Theo placed his napkin on the table and stood up. The room felt it before it processed it, the way a room registers a change in air pressure before it registers sound. Gerald Fitch was already moving, from table 1 across the floor, and the room watched him do it, watched the most senior business contact in the building cross to table 9 with an expression that made my father's smile shift slightly for the first time all evening. Theo, Gerald stopped at our table. He extended his hand. I thought that was you. I had no idea. He looked at me, then at my parents. I'm sorry, do you know who this is? My father blinked. He's Nora's. This is Theodore Marsh, Gerald said. He was not performing this. That was what was strange about it. He seemed genuinely surprised and was correcting a factual error because it needed correcting. He chairs the Norfolk Agricultural Land Trust. They've protected close to 12,000 acres from development in the last 6 years. I'd been trying to get him on the Provincial Food Systems Advisory Panel for 18 months. He paused. He keeps saying no because he's busy doing actual work. A look passed between them, something like exasperated respect. He's also, and I think you may not know this, the reason the Parkdale Community Kitchen got their commercial kitchen equipment last year and the after-school food program at 3 Scarborough schools. His Trust Community Partnership Fund. He looked at me. I imagine you know more about that than most. My father's mouth was open. Nothing came out. Theo looked at the room. He didn't raise his voice. He has the kind of steadiness that doesn't need volume. I didn't come here to make a point, he said. I came because Nora asked me to, and because she is the most genuinely good person I know. She spends her days helping children learn to trust themselves, and she goes home and writes grant applications on weekends, and she has spent years in this family being treated like a footnote to a story she didn't choose. He looked at my father. You had 8 months. You never asked my last name. That tells me what you were actually curious about. He sat back down. The room was completely silent. I stood up. My legs were not totally steady. My voice was. You've been saying it for 7 years, I said to my parents. Not loud. I wasn't performing, not always with words. In every introduction where you paused before my name, in every conversation about Adrian's projects where you'd say Honora's doing well too, like I was a footnote you were obligated to include, in every time you said teaching like it was a placeholder until I found something real. My mother looked at the tablecloth. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I'm just done adjusting myself to fit the space you've left for me. I looked at Theo. He was already standing. We walked out. 60 people watched. The coat check attendant handed us our jackets without making eye contact, very professionally. The call from Camille came 2 days later, not Adrian. Camille. Her voice was careful and kind in a way that told me she'd been thinking about what to say. She told me that Gerald Fitch had made some calls, that 2 of my father's development contacts had sent emails, not angry but pointed, about professional culture and the kind of judgment that gets demonstrated in small moments. That my mother had received a message from a colleague on a Women in Business panel she was joining, asking if everything was all right, having heard something from a mutual acquaintance. And that Adrian had told her he needed to think before they moved forward with the venue deposit because the venue was tied to a family friend of my parents, and right now he needed some space from anything that felt like the same pattern. I should have said something, Camille said. I saw what they did with the seating. I saw the place cards. I almost said something to Adrian's mom, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. I believed her. She has no reason to lie to me, and more importantly, she has no reason to tell me this at all. She told me anyway. What do you actually need from this? She asked. I told her I didn't know yet, that I needed a few days to sit with it before I made any decisions. My mother called 4 days later. Can you come for coffee? Just us. I asked her the question I'd been holding since Camille called. Do you want to repair this, or do you want the discomfort to stop? A long silence, longer than I expected. And then she said something I didn't expect. I think both of those are true right now. And I think the second one is the wrong reason to call you, but I'm calling anyway because I think the first one is also true, and I don't know how to separate them yet. That honesty cost her something. I could hear it. I told her I would come. I told her what it would require, 6 weeks of family sessions with a therapist, a real one, not a mediator, not a coach, a registered therapist, starting with a session where I spoke without interruption about what the last 7 years had felt like. Not a summary, the actual thing. She agreed without negotiating. The sessions were hard in the way that honest things are hard, not dramatic, just consistently uncomfortable and occasionally necessary. Some weeks we made real progress. Some weeks we sat in a room and endured the silence between statements, which my therapist said was its own form of communication. I believe her now. I didn't at first. I don't know yet what my family will become. I've stopped needing to know by December. What I know is that I drove home after the 3rd session and sat in the car in my parking garage for a few minutes before going upstairs, and what I felt was not relief exactly, not vindication. It was something quieter, like a window had been cracked open in a room I'd been breathing recycled air in for a very long time. Theo was on the couch when I came in, reading something on his tablet. He looked up. How was it? Hard, I said, and okay. He nodded. That was all. He didn't try to fix it or frame it. He just let it be what it was. Adrian and Camille are moving forward. They changed the venue. Smaller, a restored farmhouse outside Hamilton, which Camille said she'd always preferred anyway. She invited me to the tasting. I went. We ate 6 kinds of hors d'oeuvres and argued, genuinely and affectionately, about whether the mushroom crostini was better than the smoked salmon. It was the first time I'd laughed with my family in longer than I could easily recall. There's something I've been thinking about since the night at the distillery. Theo had been running a land trust, protecting thousands of acres, funding community programs, quietly shaping food policy conversations in this province. And none of it was visible because he never needed it to be. He did the work. The work was the point. He turned down advisory panels because he had actual crops to tend and contracts to honor, and 400 households counting on him to know what he was doing. My family measured him against a scale of appearances and found him light. They were measuring the wrong thing with the wrong instrument from a table across the room where they'd already decided not to look too carefully. I spent 7 years trying to make my work legible to people who'd already decided what it was worth. I don't think I knew until recently how much energy that takes. Not the work itself, the explaining of the work to people who are only half listening. That's the part that wears you down. So let me ask you something before I go. Is there someone in your life you've been measuring by what you assumed rather than what you actually took the time to find out? Because I've been on both sides of that now, and I can tell you, the cost of not asking is higher than most people think. I used to think the hardest part of that evening was sitting at table 9. It wasn't. The hardest part was the 7 years before it. All the small moments I'd absorbed and explained away, told myself, didn't mean what they clearly meant. What I understand now is that actions accumulate, not in a dramatic lightning strike way, just quietly, consistently, the way interest compounds. My father spent years making choices, the seating chart, the pauses before my name, the toast that used warmth as a container for dismissal, and those choices built something. They built a version of our family where one child's work was worthy of detailed pride and another's was a polite asterisk. That version of the family held together as long as no one looked at it directly. The night at the distillery, someone looked at it directly, and what had been accumulating quietly for 7 years became visible all at once. I've thought a lot about Theo in the months since. He runs nearly 900 acres, chairs a land trust, funds programs that put food on tables across this province, and he never once led with any of it. Not because he was hiding anything, because it simply wasn't the point. He does the work because the work matters, and whether or not the people at Table 1 know about it has no bearing on the wheat yield in September. That kind of clarity is something I genuinely admire. It takes a certain intelligence, not book intelligence, but the kind that knows the difference between what's real and what's performance, to stay that grounded when the world keeps asking you to justify yourself. I spent 7 years trying to translate my work into a language my family would respect. I wrote grant applications they never asked about. I won a provincial recognition they couldn't attend. And I kept adjusting, kept softening, kept leaving the door open because I thought if I could just explain it right, they'd finally see it. What I didn't understand then is that the explaining wasn't the problem. The listening was. No amount of clarity on my end could substitute for someone actually choosing to pay attention. What changed wasn't a dramatic confrontation, it was me deciding, quietly, that I was done performing for an audience that had already made up its mind. Walking out of that room didn't fix 7 years, but it was the first genuinely honest thing I'd done in that family's presence in a very long time. And honesty, even when it costs something in the short term, has a way of clearing the ground for something better to grow. My mother, sitting across from a therapist, choosing discomfort over comfort, choosing to hear me, that took real courage. Not the showy kind. The kind that shows up in a beige office on a Tuesday morning and stays in the room even when it's hard. I don't take that lightly. What I keep coming back to is this: the people in my life who have treated me with the most consistent decency are also the people who never needed me to be impressive. Theo asked what I loved about my work. Camille apologized when she didn't have to. My therapist sat with me in the silence without trying to fill it. Decency like that doesn't make the news. It just quietly holds everything together. I don't know yet what my family will fully become, but I know what I'm not willing to carry anymore, and that, more than any table assignment or toast, is what that night actually gave me.